There are monuments. And then there are myths made of metal. When we look at the Eiffel Tower today, we see beauty, elegance, romance. We see couples kissing at sunset, flashing lights dancing on steel, tourists smiling for a million snapshots. But this photo shows none of that. It shows a monster being born. Cold, black, bare. A skeleton clawing its way into the sky. This image wasn't taken to impress. It wasn't made for postcards or souvenirs. It was documentation. Industrial, brutal, honest. But decades later, it speaks louder than any finished shot ever could. Because what you're looking at isn't just a tower. You're looking at rebellion. You're looking at a nation divided. You're looking at the single most hated construction in Parisian history, at least in the beginning. Before it became the world's most visited monument, before it defined the Paris skyline, before it sparkled each night like a beacon of dreams. The Eiffel Tower was a scandal. A controversy made of 18,038 pieces of iron, 300 meters tall, held together by over 2.5 million rivets, rising like a mechanical ghost over a city of poets, painters, and purists. The year was 1887. Paris was preparing to host the Exposition Universelle, a grand world's fair to celebrate the centennial of the French Revolution. France needed a symbol, something bold, something nobody would forget. Enter Gustave Eiffel, a civil engineer with a stubborn streak and a love for wind, metal, and math. He proposed a radical idea, a tower taller than any structure on Earth, built entirely of iron. A structure so daring, so ugly, so unnecessary, that it enraged nearly every artist, critic, and intellectual in France. Newspapers called it a monstrosity. Writers signed petitions calling it a disgrace to the city. One critic famously wrote, "We, writers, painters, sculptors, architects, protest with all our force against the erection of this useless and monstrous tower." The backlash was relentless. They said it would collapse. They said it would ruin Paris forever. They said it was an insult to everything France stood for. And yet, the work began. Piece by piece, iron by iron, rivet by rivet, the tower rose. And that's when this photo was taken. Mid-construction. No curves. No crown. No glory. Just raw mechanics and dirty boots. Look closer. Down at the bottom of the frame, you'll see them. Tiny figures, almost swallowed by the structure. Men. Workers. Immigrants and locals alike. Climbing, welding, hammering. Without safety harnesses, without fanfare. Their lives hanging from girders. Their fingerprints pressed into the bones of history. They weren't building just a monument. They were building a future the world didn't yet believe in. The photo shows the frame mid-split, two halves of the tower leaning toward each other, like a pair of arms not yet ready to embrace. A moment frozen in tension. Will it come together? Will it fall? Is this madness or genius? And standing behind it all, looming in the background, the heart of Paris watches in silence. What they didn't know, what no one could know at that time, was that this incomplete beast would become the very soul of the city. But not yet. Not now. In this moment, the tower was a punchline, a folly, a mechanical invasion in a city that worshipped stone cathedrals and marble statues. This was not a tower. This was war. Between old and new. Between tradition and technology. Between what Paris had always been and what it feared to become. And yet, rising day after day, month after month, the metal crept higher. Mocked. Spat on. Feared. But relentless. But who was this man? Gustave Eiffel? Not the tower. The man. Because before the steel rose, before the protests roared, before Paris trembled under the weight of the future, there was a man who dared to offend the sky. Gustave Eiffel wasn't born into legacy. He wasn't royalty. He didn't paint. He didn't compose symphonies. He bent metal. That was his art. Born in 1832 in Dijon, France, Eiffel was an engineer with a reputation for solving problems no one else could. He built bridges across impossible spans. He designed railway stations, factories, aqueducts. Anything others feared, he embraced. But more than that, he believed that iron, not stone, was the future. To the artists of Paris, iron was crude, mechanical, industrial, dirty. It had no soul. But to Eiffel, it was poetry. It was strength. It was structure turned into music. When he proposed the idea of a 300-meter iron tower, most laughed. Even his peers in engineering called it unbuildable. But Eiffel didn't flinch. He spent years refining the design, drawing not only on engineering principles, but on nature itself. Modeling the shape of the tower after the human femur, the strongest bone in the body, and the branching of trees, which spread weight downward with perfect efficiency. He said, "The tower will not just resist the wind. It will speak to it." Think about that. He wasn't just building a structure. He was trying to speak to the sky. But vision always has a price. And Eiffel paid it in ridicule. They mocked him in the newspapers, calling his dream Eiffel's nightmare and the tragic lamppost. Caricatures flooded the streets. Drawings of the tower crushing Notre Dame, spearing the moon, toppling over the Louvre. And yet, day by day, bolt by bolt, the tower climbed. Gustave Eiffel invested not only his reputation, but his personal fortune. He funded large portions of the project himself when backers got nervous. If the tower failed, he would be ruined. He didn't just risk his career, he risked his name. And that's where the story gets even more personal. Because Eiffel knew that the tower wasn't just about the exposition. It wasn't just about France. It was about proving something deeper, that beauty could be born from precision. That art and science weren't enemies. That the industrial world didn't have to destroy romance. It could redefine it. To him, the tower wasn't an eyesore. It was evolution. Still, the city pushed back. Even as the base was completed, artists lobbied the government to stop construction. But by then, it was too late. The foundations were too deep, the structure too sound, the vision too alive. And so, with every swing of a hammer, Eiffel silenced his critics, not with words, but with iron. It's easy to look at the finished Eiffel Tower and forget the hatred it once inspired. It's easy to see it sparkle at night and think it was always loved. But this photo, this mid-construction portrait of defiance, reminds us, progress is ugly before it's beautiful. Innovation is almost always misunderstood. The people who build tomorrow often do so in the face of laughter, fear, and even rage. By March 1888, the tower had reached over 200 feet, then 300, then 500. Workers labored through bitter winters and scorching summers, eating lunch on beams, dangling over empty space, trusting only their calloused hands and the rivets they drilled. At least one man died. Official reports say it was only one, but rumors say more. Safety measures were primitive, but the project moved forward with machine-like precision. Every piece of iron was pre-cut, numbered, and brought to the site ready to fit like a giant, terrifying puzzle. The Parisians watched in horror and fascination. Some began to visit the construction site just to stare. It was grotesque. It was mesmerizing. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. And yet, Eiffel remained silent. He didn't respond to every article. He didn't waste energy on every insult. He just built. Because deep down, he knew the only way to make people believe in the impossible is to show them it exists. By the time the Eiffel Tower reached its full height, 300 meters, nearly 1,000 feet, it had become the tallest structure ever built by man. Taller than the Washington Monument, taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza, taller than any cathedral spire in Europe. It pierced the clouds. It changed the skyline forever. And on March 31st, 1889, Gustave Eiffel stood at the very top. Not near the top, at the very peak. He climbed all 1,710 steps himself, No elevator, no fanfare. At age 56, in a top hat and coat, he braved the wind and the cold and planted the French flag at the summit. He stood above the city that had mocked him, above the critics, the petitions, the insults, above even the clouds themselves. Reporters who followed him struggled with altitude sickness. Eiffel remained calm, and when asked what he thought of the view, he simply said, "It is magnificent, but it is not my tower. It is France's." The Eiffel Tower opened to the public just weeks later, in May 1889, as the centerpiece of the Exposition Universelle. Millions came, and suddenly, the tide shifted. People who had called it an eyesore now marveled at the engineering. Artists who had ridiculed it began to sketch it. Even the harshest critics couldn't deny the spectacle. Parisians walked inside it, climbed it, dined in it, photographed it. Some still hated it, but most were stunned. And then, the real shock came. The Eiffel Tower made money. A lot of it. Tickets to the elevators. Restaurants built into the platforms. Souvenirs. Panoramic views unlike anything seen before. In just 6 months, nearly 2 million people visited the tower. What had once been Paris' biggest embarrassment had become its biggest attraction. But even then, the tower's future was far from secure. You see, the tower had been built with an expiration date. Yes, an expiration date. The land it stood on had only been leased for 20 years. And when that lease expired in 1909, the plan was to tear it down. That's right. The Eiffel Tower was meant to be temporary. Imagine that. One of the most iconic structures in the world, scheduled for demolition before it had even reached middle age. But Gustave Eiffel was not a man who left things to chance. He knew the tower's survival would depend on proving its usefulness. So he got to work again. He turned the tower into a scientific laboratory. He invited physicists and meteorologists to use it for experiments. He conducted wind resistance tests, thermal readings, and even gravity experiments from the upper levels. And then came the moment that changed everything: radio. At the dawn of the 20th century, wireless telegraphy was revolutionizing communication. And Eiffel knew the tower was the perfect antenna. In 1903, he allowed the French military to install a radio transmitter at the top. By 1906, the Eiffel Tower was transmitting signals across Europe. In 1909, when the lease expired and the question of demolition returned, the military intervened. They couldn't afford to lose the tower. It was now a strategic asset. Eiffel had saved it, not with speeches or protests, but with purpose. And that may be the most brilliant move of all. Because beauty can be argued. But usefulness? Usefulness is undeniable. The tower had gone from controversial to essential. And just in time. Because war was coming. In 1914, as World War I exploded across Europe, the Eiffel Tower became the eye of the storm. Its radio signals helped detect German troop movements. It intercepted enemy transmissions. It relayed orders faster than ever before. Some historians believe the Eiffel Tower's communication capabilities played a role in the Battle of the Marne, one of the war's most pivotal early victories for the Allies. But the tower wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol, a silent sentinel watching over a city under siege. While bombs fell and soldiers bled and empires crumbled, the Eiffel Tower stood, scarred by war, but unbroken. And when the war ended, it was still there. Tall, proud, necessary. Its survival was no longer a question. It had become something deeper than metal. It had become memory. June 14, 1940. German troops march into Paris. The city of lights goes dark. Swastikas rise over government buildings. French citizens weep in silence. The Nazis take control, and one of the first places they set their eyes on, the Eiffel Tower. The same iron beast that had once been hated, then loved, then transformed into a scientific marvel, now stood as a target. For Hitler, the tower was both a prize and a problem. It was a symbol of French pride, a monument of resistance, a structure that dared to reach higher than his empire. He wanted to conquer it. Photos show Hitler standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, hands behind his back, staring. But look closely. He never climbed it. He never touched the summit. Because he couldn't. You see, just before the Nazis arrived, French resistance fighters did something genius. They cut the lift cables. They sabotaged the elevators. Deliberately. So if Hitler wanted to plant his flag at the top, he'd have to climb 1,710 steps by foot. He refused. And in that moment, the Eiffel Tower won its first silent battle of the war. It denied the dictator his spectacle. From that day on, the tower remained untouchable. The Nazi flag was hung, yes, but only halfway up. The full-size swastika flag blew away in the wind on the first day. It had to be replaced by a smaller one. Even nature rejected him. Paris remained under Nazi occupation until 1944, and during that time, the Eiffel Tower became both a silent witness and a quiet resistor. French workers used its height to spy on German movements. They jammed enemy transmissions. They passed coded messages from its observation decks. And yet, Hitler never got over it. In 1944, as the Allies approached Paris, he gave a chilling order. Paris must not fall into the enemy's hands. And if it does, it must be nothing but a pile of rubble. He ordered the destruction of the Eiffel Tower, along with bridges, museums, entire neighborhoods. It was to be erased. The man in charge of Paris at the time, General Dietrich von Choltitz, received the orders. But he couldn't do it. Despite being a Nazi general, Choltitz disobeyed. He saved the city, and the Eiffel Tower was spared again, this time not by design, but by a man's conscience. Some say it was guilt. Some say fear. Some say all. Whatever it was, the order to destroy the tower was never carried out. And so, when Paris was liberated on August 25, 1944, the Eiffel Tower stood tall once more. As French flags returned to balconies, and people flooded the streets, and bells rang across the Seine, the Iron Tower watched, unblinking, unbent. It had survived another war, another threat, another chapter of history trying to bury it. But its trials weren't over yet. In the post-war years, many saw the tower as outdated. Other cities had begun to rise with glass and chrome. Skyscrapers pierced the clouds. And some said the Eiffel Tower had lost its shine. There were proposals, again, to tear it down, to replace it, to modernize. But Paris said no, because by now, the Eiffel Tower wasn't just a structure. It was a memory palace. Every girder held a story. Every bolt held a secret. Every shadow it cast told a tale of revolution, resistance, and resurrection. And here's where it gets even more remarkable. The Eiffel Tower, once feared for being too modern, became the perfect symbol of timelessness. It appeared in films, novels, paintings. It became the backdrop for weddings, protests, revolutions, and love songs. People proposed under it. People danced beside it. People mourned in its shadow. From kings to beggars, lovers to loners. Everyone who came to Paris felt the pull of the tower. It was no longer controversial. It was sacred. By the late 20th century, the Eiffel Tower had become something no one predicted. A soul. Not just a structure. Not just a landmark. But a heartbeat in iron. It began appearing everywhere. In the opening shots of movies, in fashion campaigns, in love letters, in dreams. Children in Brazil knew it. Artists in Tokyo sketched it. Poets in Morocco wrote sonnets about it. Why? Because it had transcended place. It had become an idea, a monument to what humans can do when they refuse to obey limits. Tourists called it magical, but ask any engineer, and they'll tell you, there's nothing magical about the math. It's triangles, it's compression, it's rivets and balance and load distribution. And yet, people still cry when they see it for the first time. They still stop in their tracks when they look up at it at night, when the lights begin to twinkle. What makes that possible? It's not the steel. It's the story. The story of a man who was ridiculed, and still built it. The story of a city that tried to erase it, but then couldn't live without it. The story of wars, loves, losses, triumphs, and survival. The Eiffel Tower is the most visited paid monument in the world. Every year, over 7 million people ascend its platforms. They take selfies. They eat in the sky. They toast to life 300 meters above the streets. But beneath the joy is a deeper truth. The Eiffel Tower has become the most recognizable silhouette on Earth. More than the pyramids. More than the Colosseum. More than any palace or skyscraper. It is the face of Paris, but more than that, it's the face of possibility. And still, she keeps secrets. Few know that there are hidden apartments at the top, one of which Gustave Eiffel himself used. Inside, he entertained scientists, writers, diplomats. He watched the stars. He studied air pressure. He rode in silence while the wind howled around him. That room still exists, still furnished, still silent. A forgotten throne in the clouds. And then there's the underground chambers, hidden machinery that controls the elevators, systems from another century still working like clockwork. There are trapdoors, winding staircases, forgotten beams signed by workers, ancient rivets that haven't been touched in over 100 years. The tower, for all its fame, remains partly a mystery, like a cathedral that hums in code. And here's what's even more astonishing. The Eiffel Tower was built in just 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days. Let that sink in. With no computers, no AI, no 3D modeling, just pencils, compasses, calculations, and courage. More than 18,000 individual pieces of iron. Over 2.5 million rivets. Assembled with bare hands, sweat, and fire. No cranes. No prefab parts. No GPS. And yet, it has stood for over 135 years. Untouched by time. Unaffected by trends. Unapologetically itself. But beyond the stats, beyond the selfies, beyond the postcards, there's something the Eiffel Tower does that no other monument can quite replicate. It gives people hope. Hope that you can be mocked and still win. Hope that you can be temporary and become eternal. Hope that something once hated can become beloved. Hope that even in an age of glass and noise and speed, iron can still whisper something timeless. And maybe that's what draws us to it. Maybe that's why it still matters. Because we live in a world where things break fast. Attention spans, friendships, governments, promises. But the Eiffel Tower? It stays. It doesn't bend to fashion. It doesn't collapse under criticism. It doesn't need to be updated, filtered, or rebranded. It just is. And sometimes, in a world drowning in noise, we need something that just is. Solid, steady, true. A compass made of steel. The Eiffel Tower has lived through more than most empires. And yet, in the 21st century, it faces a new kind of challenge, a world that's always changing. Terrorism, climate crisis, technology overload, social unrest, cultural reinvention. In this new world, symbols are questioned, icons are vandalized, history is rewritten, and nothing seems permanent, not even iron. In recent years, Paris has been struck by tragedy. November 13th, 2015. Coordinated terrorist attacks kill 130 people. The city is wounded. The world watches in silence. And once again, the Eiffel Tower becomes a signal. After the attacks, its lights are turned off. Dark. Morning. Still. And then, days later, it lights up again, this time in the colors of the French flag. Blue, white, red. Not in celebration, but in defiance, in resilience, in unity. People gathered beneath it in candlelight. Tourists cried. Parisians sang the national anthem. The tower didn't speak. It didn't move. It didn't need to. It stood, just like it always has. But the tower isn't immune to time. Its paint peels. Its rivets loosen. Its iron rusts. It requires constant care, constant love. Every 7 years, it is completely repainted by hand. Over 60 tons of paint applied. By men and women suspended from ropes, hundreds of feet in the air, clinging to a skeleton older than their grandparents. Each coat of paint is a rebirth. Each brushstroke, a prayer against decay. The Eiffel Tower is not immortal, but it fights for every year of its life. And now, it faces another threat, the planet itself. As temperatures rise and weather patterns shift, the very materials that hold the tower together are tested. Iron expands in heat. Moisture weakens joints. Pollution corrodes the surface. The city has responded. New eco-friendly paint, solar-powered lighting, sustainability campaigns to protect the tower's future. Because in a warming world, even legends must adapt. But perhaps the biggest transformation of all has been internal. What the tower means has changed. To some, it's a romantic cliché. To others, a symbol of resistance. To engineers, a masterpiece. To artists, a muse. To the world, a dream made real. It is timeless because it refuses to be one thing. It is not stuck in the past. It moves forward, quietly, confidently. And here's the twist. This photo, the one that started this story, is not of a finished tower. It's a moment during construction. It shows the base, half-built, girders stretching skyward, cranes dangling, men walking across beams like tightropes. It's not the end result. It's the becoming. And maybe that's the most powerful message of all. We always celebrate the final version, the ribbon cutting, the skyline shot, the moment of completion. But this photo reminds us, greatness doesn't come fully formed. It's built, welded, lifted, one impossible piece at a time, with danger, with doubt, with vision. This photo shows the hard part, the messy part, the uncertain part, the part no one frames in a postcard. But it's real. And in that realness, there's beauty. Because that's what all of us are. Under construction. Always. So the next time you see the Eiffel Tower, look again. Don't just see the silhouette. See the scaffolding. See the weld marks. See the calloused hands that built it. See the storm it survived. See the protests it outlasted. See the dictators it defied. See the sky it dared to touch. And remember, it was never supposed to last. It was never meant to stay, but it did. And maybe that's why it moves us. Because it reminds us that the most impossible things can survive. If someone believes in them long enough. A little boy stands beneath the tower, his fingers sticky with crepes, his eyes wide with wonder. He's never seen anything like it. It rises into the clouds like a rocket ship made of lace. Not heavy, not cold, but light. Alive. He tugs at his father's hand. Did people really build that? His father nods. He doesn't give him the full story. Not the hate, not the war, not the protests. Just a smile. Yes. And they said it couldn't be done. The boy stares again. Silent. Something awakens in him. A seed. Someday, he'll draw his own tower. Someday, he'll try to build something too. And the Eiffel Tower will be there, in the background of his ambition. Thousands of kilometers away, an old woman watches a video on her phone. She's sitting in a nursing home. Her eyes are tired. Her memories sharp. She watches a slow-motion drone shot of the tower at sunset. Golden light. Music swelling. Tourists posing. She doesn't smile. She remembers a different Paris. She remembers sirens. She remembers ration lines. She remembers the day the Germans marched in, and the day they fled. She remembers standing in a crowd, watching a French flag rise again over the tower. She was just a girl. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she remembers the sound, not of celebration, but of breathing, like the city was exhaling for the first time in years. She puts the phone down. She whispers, almost to herself, "You're still standing. I'm glad." In Tokyo, a painter sketches the tower over and over. In Johannesburg, a poet writes about it without ever having seen it. In New York, a woman wears a necklace shaped like its outline. In Baghdad, a teenager watches YouTube videos of people proposing under it and dreams of going there one day. The tower touches lives that have never touched Paris, because it speaks a language that needs no translation. And in the quiet corners of the tower itself, tour guides pause before reciting their lines. Janitors whistle as they sweep. Engineers tap on steel beams, checking for soundness. Cooks prepare meals at dizzying heights. Lovers kiss in elevators. Children scream as they run up the stairs. A violinist plays in the plaza below. Life swirls around it. It doesn't change, but it holds change. It holds us, our fears, our triumphs, our dreams. Once, long ago, a man named Gustav Eiffel was asked, "What is the point of this tower?" And he replied, "It is not only the art of the engineer, but also the work of the poet." That duality remains, because the Eiffel Tower is not just built with bolts. It's built with belief. So now, I want you to do something. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture yourself standing beneath it. Feel the wind. Hear the city. Smell the bread carts. Taste the coffee in the air. Look up. Really look. Let its scale humble you. Let its beauty remind you that not all miracles are made of light and magic. Some are made of iron and pain and stubbornness. Some are born not in dreams, but in resistance. Because the Eiffel Tower is proof of something we forget, that human beings are capable of beauty, that in a world full of wars and noise and distraction, we can still build something that lasts. We can still reach upward, not to escape, but to remind ourselves that we're meant to rise. Let's go back to the photo, the one you saw at the very beginning. Look at it again in your mind. It's not glossy. It's not filtered. It doesn't sparkle. It's raw. Steel bones, scaffolding, and sky. No tourists. No lights. No love stories. Just the beginning. This is what greatness looks like before it becomes great. This is the version we never celebrate. The incomplete version. The ugly, awkward, rising from nothing version. The version full of risk, of criticism, of fear. But here's the thing. That's the version that matters most. Because that's where the truth lives. Every great thing you've ever admired, a tower, a book, a movement, a life, it all looked like this in the beginning. Unfinished, unloved, unbelieved. But someone kept going. Someone kept rising. Someone kept building even when the world laughed, doubted, or turned away. That's what the Eiffel Tower teaches us. Not how to be perfect, but how to persist. Now think about your own life, your own work, your dreams, your struggles. What are you building? What towers are still just blueprints in your mind? Maybe your Eiffel Tower isn't made of iron. Maybe it's made of ideas, of courage, of healing, of love. And maybe, right now, it's just scaffolding. It doesn't look impressive yet. It might feel shaky, incomplete, unstable. But look at this photo again. It's proof that greatness doesn't come all at once. It comes one piece at a time, with bolts, with sweat, with sacrifice, and with the absolute refusal to give up. Because the most iconic structure in Paris was once just a joke, a drawing, a pile of iron nobody wanted. And now, it's a miracle made of metal. It's a beating heart at the center of a city. It's love in the form of structure. And it stands, every day, through every storm, not because it's unbreakable, but because someone dared to build it in the first place. Imagine Gustav Eiffel in 1887, standing beneath the first few beams, being mocked, being warned, being told it's impossible. And still, he built. He didn't build for applause. He didn't build to be loved. He built because he believed. Now imagine if he hadn't. Imagine if he'd listened to the critics, to the fear, to the doubt. There'd be no tower, no photo, no spark in the eyes of that child in Paris, no memories in the heart of that elderly woman, no dreams in the minds of millions. So what about you? What dream have you abandoned because others couldn't see it yet? What vision did you stop building because it wasn't beautiful fast enough? What if your unfinished tower is already inspiring someone, and you just don't know it yet? The photo we started with is not an ending. It's a question, a challenge. It asks, will you keep building, even when it's ugly, even when no one believes in it but you. Because the truth is, the world needs more towers. Not just tall ones, but brave ones, built by people willing to rise, even when they stand alone. So here's what I want to leave you with. You are under construction. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's where the magic happens. Keep rising. Keep building. Keep daring. Because one day, someone will look at your life, your choices, your work, your strength, and they'll say, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Even if they never knew how hard it was to build. And maybe, just maybe, 100 years from now, someone will look at a photo of you, unfinished, unsure, unshaken, and they'll say, "That's what courage looks like." The Eiffel Tower is not alone. It may be the most iconic, the most photographed, the most instantly recognizable, but it's not the only monument that stands for something more than itself. All over the world, other towers rise, not just made of steel and stone, but of spirit, of memory, of meaning. Let's take a walk around the earth. In New York, the Statue of Liberty stands with a torch held high. She was a gift from France, from Eiffel's own countrymen. She was born from hope, forged in copper, and like the Eiffel Tower, she was once mocked, doubted, and misunderstood. Now, she is the face of freedom. People cross oceans to look into her eyes, to believe that what she promises is still possible. She is not just a statue. She is a lighthouse for the human soul. In India, the Taj Mahal gleams beneath moonlight, built not for power, not for war, but for love. It is a tomb and a promise. An emperor built it for his queen so that their love would never die. It took decades, thousands of workers, incredible sacrifice, and yet, centuries later, people still weep when they see it, because it reminds them that love can outlast death. In Brazil, Christ the Redeemer opens his arms to the world. Perched high above Rio de Janeiro, he watches over the city with open palms, not clenched fists. He is not a symbol of conquest. He is not armed. He simply stands, in invitation, in peace, in grace, for believers and non-believers alike. He reminds the world that power doesn't always have to look like force. Sometimes it looks like surrender. In Cambodia, the ruins of Angkor whisper of ancient wisdom. In Egypt, the Great Pyramids defy time itself. In Japan, the rising sun glows behind Mount Fuji, sacred and still. In every culture, on every continent, there is something we built not just to be seen, but to be remembered. Something that outlasts the people who built it. Because that's what monuments are. They are messages in stone. They are prayers written in architecture. They are proof that we were here, and that we felt something worth preserving. And now, in the heart of Paris, the Eiffel Tower joins them all. But it's different. Because while most monuments are made to honor the past, the Eiffel Tower was made to challenge the future. It wasn't built for a king. It wasn't built for a god. It wasn't even built for permanence. It was built as an experiment. A structure that dared to ask, what if we stopped looking back and started reaching up? At the time, it was the tallest thing humans had ever built. It touched the sky before we had planes. It kissed the clouds before we understood the heavens. It showed us that we could rise, that we didn't have to be limited by what had been done before, that steel could be elegant, that utility could be beautiful, that vision could silence doubt. And that's why the Eiffel Tower isn't just a tower. It's a question that keeps echoing, a challenge that keeps daring, a story that keeps unfolding. Because long after Eiffel died, long after the iron began to rust, long after wars came and went, the tower still stands. And that means something. It means we don't build just for now. We build for forever. We don't create just for applause. We create for meaning. We don't live just to survive. We live to leave something behind. Every generation gets to decide what it builds. Some build borders. Others build bridges. Some build weapons. Others build wonders. Some build fear. Others build faith. The Eiffel Tower belongs to the second group. It belongs to the dreamers. The risk takers. The ones who look at a pile of iron and see something impossible and build it anyway. So here's the truth. You don't need to be an architect to build something lasting. You can build with words, with kindness, with courage, with love. You can leave behind more than a grave. You can leave behind a legacy. And that might just be the most important structure of all. Her name was Elise Marichal. She wasn't an engineer. She wasn't a politician. She wasn't an artist or a writer. She was just a child. A little girl with brown shoes, messy hair, and wide eyes, who happened to live 2 streets away from the construction site of something the world had never seen before. Elise was 6 years old in 1887 when the first iron beams were laid down for what would become the Eiffel Tower. Her father was a baker. Her mother stayed home and embroidered curtains by candlelight. They had no money for travel, no dreams of grandeur. But every day after school, Elise would walk to the edge of the construction zone and watch the workers. She didn't know what it was. No one really did. To her, it looked like a jungle gym made of skeletons. It looked like a giant trying to stand up. At first, she came out of curiosity. But over time, it became something else. A ritual, a fascination, a friendship. She started naming the pieces. "That beam is called Madeline," she would whisper. "And the one that curves like a smile? That's Louise." To Elise, the tower wasn't a structure. It was alive. It was growing, like her. She watched it rise through storms, through muddy Parisian winters, through hot, dusty summers. She brought her little notebook and sketched what she saw, not because she wanted to be an artist, but because she wanted to remember. She didn't understand the math, or the politics, or the controversy, but she felt something. She felt like she was watching a miracle. When the protests began, when newspapers called the tower a monstrosity, and people demanded it be torn down, she didn't understand the outrage. She asked her father, "Why do they hate it so much?" And he said, "Because they've never seen something like it. And when people are scared, they pretend to be angry." That sentence never left her. By 1889, Elise was 8 years old, and the tower was done. She stood beneath it on opening day with her parents, holding a paper flag in one hand and her sketchbook in the other. When Gustave Eiffel himself walked by, she gasped. He was taller than she imagined, quieter, stern. But when their eyes met for a brief second, just a flicker, Elise whispered, "Thank you." He didn't hear her, but somehow she believed he did. Years passed. The tower stayed. So did Elise. She grew up, fell in love, married a man who sold newspapers. They had 2 sons. She told them stories every night, not of fairies or dragons, but of the tower. "I watched it grow," she'd say. "It wasn't supposed to stay, but it did. Just like love, just like courage." In 1940, the war came. Nazi flags hung from her beloved tower. German boots marched across the Champ de Mars. Her eldest son, Marcel, joined the resistance. Her youngest was too sick to fight. One night, as bombs echoed across the city, Elise stood at her window and looked at the tower. It didn't shine. It didn't move, but it was still there. And that was enough. After the war, she lost both her husband and her voice. A stroke took her speech, but not her mind. She lived quietly, alone, in the same apartment where she had first drawn that iron skeleton in her notebook. And every morning, even when she couldn't walk well, someone would wheel her out to the balcony. She'd stare at the Eiffel Tower, smile, and nod. In 1964, a French journalist named Jean-Paul Brousset came to interview residents for a story on the tower's 75th anniversary. Someone told him, "Talk to the old woman on Rue Claire. They say she watched the whole thing go up." He knocked on her door. She couldn't speak, but she opened her sketchbook, yellowed with age. There they were. Madeline, Louise, the beams with names, drawings of rivets, cables, and shadows. He sat in silence, flipping page after page. And when he looked up, he found Elise's eyes full of tears. He asked her, "Why did you keep all this?" She pointed to a drawing of the tower halfway built. She placed her hand over her heart, and she tapped her chest twice. Once for memory, once for meaning. She died later that year. No fanfare, no headlines. But her notebook was donated to the Musée d'Orsay. It now sits in a glass case, next to photographs, engineering plans, and blueprints. And when schoolchildren pass by, some pause and stare. Not at the math, not at the measurements, but at the drawings, at the little girl's handwriting, at the way she gave names to steel. They ask the guide, "Who drew these?" And the guide answers, "Someone who understood before anyone else that this tower was never just about metal. It was about becoming." And she, like the tower, became something no one saw coming. A witness, a guardian, a storyteller. Someday, the Eiffel Tower will fall. It might take 100 years. It might take 1,000. But time, as always, will win. Rust will creep in. Storms will bend what cannot be broken. And eventually, gravity will have its say. The tower that touched the sky will return to the earth. And when it does, what will be left? Not the iron, not the bolts, not the blueprints. Those will crumble, fade, disappear. But stories? Stories remain. The story of a man who dared to dream higher than anyone thought possible. The story of a little girl who named the beams. The story of millions who stood beneath it and whispered dreams into the air. The story of a city, a country, a species, trying, always trying, to rise. Because that's what the Eiffel Tower really is. It's not a monument. It's not a tourist attraction. It's not just a postcard or a pretty view. It is a mirror that asks, what will you build while you're here? Not all of us will leave behind towers, but we all leave something. A word, a wound, a memory, a song, a smile, something that lives longer than we do. Maybe your tower is a family. Maybe it's a book, a garden, a friendship that saves a life, a kindness no one expected. Maybe you build in silence. Maybe you build with no one watching. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you build. Because the alternative is decay. It's apathy. It's rust in the soul. The Eiffel Tower didn't need to exist, but it does. Because someone decided it should. That's power. Not to destroy, but to create. Every day, we are surrounded by the temporary. News cycles, social media, trends, noise. But the things that endure, they're always the same. Love, art, sacrifice, imagination, truth. So here's a thought. The next time you see the Eiffel Tower, in person, in a photo, in your mind, don't just admire it. Listen, because it's whispering something. Something not just in French, not just in metal, but in the universal language of wonder. It's saying, look what we can do when we don't give up. And when you hear that, remember this. You, too, are building something. Whether you know it or not. Every moment, every choice, every act of grace or cruelty, it's all part of your tower. So choose wisely. Choose to build something worth standing for. Even when the wind howls. Even when the critics laugh. Even when the world calls you mad. Because the world has always called dreamers mad, until the dream becomes real. The Eiffel Tower was never meant to last, but it has. And in doing so, it has become something greater than itself. It has become a testament to vision, to resilience, to the idea that beauty doesn't need permission to exist. So now, as the sun sets behind its iron frame, as lights flicker to life on its bones, as a child somewhere points at it in awe, ask yourself, what will they point at when I am gone? Will they remember your tower? Will they feel its warmth? Will it still stand in someone's heart, in someone's hope, in someone's impossible dream? You were never meant to last either. But the things you build, they just might. And that is enough. That is everything.